Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Mercy of the God of War. Episode 14. They stayed silent for a little while, staring deeply into each other's eyes. There was no sound around but the rain, falling quietly around them, the downpour slowly turning into a gentle rain. Cassandra smiled and took his other hand, linking her fingers with his. Then, she stepped forward, and they exchanged a long, deep kiss. Their kiss had a fresh taste of rain and eternity. Despite the cold around them, Cassandra's heart had never felt warmer than at this moment. They exchanged that kiss in a religious atmosphere as if they were sealing their promise. When they gently stepped back, a drop rolled down her cheek, but no one would have been able to tell if it was a tear or the rain. Cassandra was smiling, and it didn't matter much. Then, they both pulled on the silk thread at the same time, and, to his surprise, it separated perfectly, leaving two little bracelets wrapped around their wrists. The people watching were confused. How did that long thread separate into two so easily, and in such perfect knots, too? "We're done for today," whispered Cassandra. "Done? Already?" repeated Sherian, surprised. The young concubine walked over to her sister, hugging Miss Andra in her arms to try and calm her down. They went to shelter themselves under the roofed part of the room, where the servants rushed to bring them thick towels. Yes. Both partners usually keep this thread around their wrists until the next rain, and it is done. I was expecting something much bigger. Do you have any idea what hassle the wedding ceremonies are here? Let alone the ones in the imperial family. The Rain tribe isn't the showy type. As long as the god of water has been able to witness it, any kind of ceremony is holy and perfectly valid. We don't need grand ceremonies, decorations, or a lot of people. As long as both parties were sincere, we are now acknowledged as lifetime partners, this is all that matters. It was a beautiful ceremony, Cassandra, said Karine, glaring at her daughter for her to shut up. Your tribe has a beautiful tradition. I prefer it to the ones here. We are all about the grand celebrations and showing off, while this feels much more intimate and sincere. That prayer was beautiful. Miss Andra was still weeping silently. Cassandra kept hugging her and caressing her hair until she calmed down. This may have been a bit too much for her. It brought back painful memories of a time where their friends and family were alive, and they were both living very differently. Miss Andra had lied, stolen, and hurt other people, and hearing the whole prayer again made her feel ashamed and disgusted in herself. As the ceremony was over, Karine ordered for them to move to another room to sit comfortably and rest for a bit while the servants brought large trays of food once again. It was something like brunch probably, as it wasn't really early enough or late enough for a proper meal. To help everyone warm up, some tea was brought and Miss Andra insisted on being the one to prepare it and serve it to everyone. Cassandra sat on a couch with Karen's arm around her shoulders as she snuggled under a large fur blanket. She hadn't really realized how cold she was until then. However, she also didn't want to change into normal clothes yet. She was happy to wear the traditional green of her tribe, even if all of the fake Borean ink had already been washed away by the rain. If it had been real, it would have lasted several hours at least, but it couldn't be helped. Cassandra kept caressing the little silver thread around her wrist, feeling a bit numb with happiness. Meanwhile, Cherienne was gazing at Miss Andra, frowning a bit. The young girl's tears had dried, but her eyes were still red and she would sniffle from time to time. "What were you crying for? Marrying your sister away?" she asked. Miss Andra answered with a glare, though she quickly stopped to go back to preparing the tea. Corinne slapped her daughter's thigh, frowning. "You insensitive daughter! When did I raise you to be so heartless? Do I have to answer that?" Cherienne got another slap and shut up after that, only making annoyed faces and sulking on the side. Aside from Cherienne, most people in the room actually understood the real reasons behind Miss Sandra's tears, though they wouldn't have been so blunt about it. The prayer they had recited taught about love and being true and selfless. Miss Andra had lost all of that at a young age and grown into someone far from those ideals. For the first time in a while, she felt sullied by her past as a prostitute, and the thefts she had committed. That ceremony had been too much of a brutal reminder of that. "Did your parents hold that ceremony too?" asked Lady Corinne, trying to pull the topic away from Miss Andra as she distributed the tea. "No. Our father died when our mother was pregnant with Miss Andra," confessed Cassandra. "May I ask how?" "He was in an accident," replied Miss Andra. "Our mother said he died when they were building houses. There was an accident and our father got badly injured. One of the houses they were building became unstable because of a storm. Our father wanted to go and help secure his friend's house, but it collapsed on them," said Cassandra. "Our uncle was there too, and he saw 3 men die with him. The house collapsed in the river and just washed them all away. Our mother got the news once it was all over. Only our uncle returned, but he was severely injured. He passed a few hours later." "By the great dragon," whispered Corinne. "I can't imagine how sad your mother must have been." Cassandra was about to say something, but a loud growl interrupted her. They all heard Cray land loudly next door, and a few seconds later, Rune too. Its growl was higher pitched than the black dragon's. Then, little Sry showed up in the room, as the only one small enough to sneak in, and went to curl up at Corinne's feet, its eyes watching the wall behind where they could hear its siblings bickering again. "I don't remember him," said Cassandra. "Our mother told us about him many times, though. He was one of our tribe's best architects and he had built our house too. I wish I could see our house again." "Maybe you could go there again?" asked Cherienne. Cassandra shook her head. "It would be very dangerous. The swamps we lived in are now under the Eastern Republic's territory. I don't even think there's anything left of it, they probably destroyed it." Miss Andra nodded sadly. Even Lady Corinne didn't dare to ask about their old tribe again. She was aware that, despite the fact that their rival had taken over the former tribe's parcel, it was the war between the Dragon Empire and the Eastern Republic that had destroyed these girls' homeland. Somehow, it was only luck that the Dragon Empire hadn't been the one to destroy the Rain tribe. If they had, it would have made this conversation even more awkward, and added another gap between Karen and Cassandra. This conversation had gone a bit sour after such an intense ceremony. Somehow, the rain ceremony had been so solemn, it had brought some deep buried memories to the surface. The nostalgic feeling that hovered over Cassandra's heart made her feel a bit bittersweet. For a while, everyone focused on eating, and an awkward silence filled the room until Cherienne spoke. So, after that ceremony, what is changing, exactly? You mentioned something about giving up your mind, body, and all. Is it for real? That sounded a lot like you two were going to commit suicide. Cassandra chuckled. No, not at all. It had a deeper meaning than that. The water god teaches us to not hold on to material things, not even our body. But your mind. It means we have to elevate ourselves from earthly things. We only see through the eyes of those we love. It means we must care about others before ourselves. Well, I like to care about myself more, said Sherian. Others can come after. Your people had a very selfless way, but I still think this is a bit odd. I agree, replied Cassandra with a chuckle. Since I grew up in the Dragon Empire after that, I do see our differences, but I've also grown to love both. I like the dedication of the Rain tribe to others, but I also like how living in the Dragon Empire is teaching us to care about ourselves. It's a very different environment, after all. Cassandra had already thought about this before. Somehow, she felt that having met Karen had allowed her to grow as a person. She wasn't afraid of her own shadow anymore, but she cherished her own life more. She was miles away from the slave girl who had lost all her will to live in that arena. She had grown a lot more in those few months, more than in the previous few years. After her words, Miss Andra and Sherian started an argument about the different ways of life between the Dragon Empire's people and the Rain tribe, but Cassandra was too tired to take part. Somehow, all this rain had made her a bit sleepy, and she just enjoyed this long brunch, her head on Karen's shoulder. She kept snacking on those cheese cubes and green grapes, but also some slices of dried and smoked meat, which Miss Andra quickly took notice of. "Hainu, you're eating meat again," she said with a frown. "Sorry, it's the baby." Cassandra couldn't see it, but Karen glared at Miss Andra, warning her. The war god put a hand around his concubine's belly. Karine, too, clicked her tongue. "Let her eat. Your sister is pregnant. She can eat and drink whatever she wants as long as she stays healthy." "Is that why you sent that bottle of wine to our room, Mother?" growled Karen, annoyed. It wasn't that often that the third prince would get mad at his own mother. All the servants in the room froze on the spot, their eyes going to the imperial concubine with a bit of worry. He wouldn't do something to his own mother, would he? However, Karine was not impressed at all. The war god was her own son, after all. His obsidian eyes had no effect on her. "Why can't I? I know Cassandra is reasonable. You would drink most of it by yourself anyway." She wasn't wrong, but Karen still glared at his mother, a bit annoyed. Cassandra chuckled. Truth was, she really didn't mind that little taste of mulled wine before sleeping. It may have helped her sleep better, even. However, she wouldn't dare to say that in front of the war god. Moreover, she had noticed, throughout the lunch, Karen didn't take his hand off of her belly. Even while he was eating, the war god would only use his right hand. It wasn't that surprising that he would easily hold her and cuddle, but Cassandra was starting to wonder if there hadn't been a bit of change since the previous night. Maybe it was only her imagination, but they had slept in a spooning position, and that time, he also had his hand covering her little baby bump. Was it because he had felt the baby kicking? Cassandra silently hoped that the father of her unborn child would slowly grow more attached to this child. Until then, Karen had shown more care for her than usual since the beginning of the pregnancy, but not much care about the baby at all. Maybe he hadn't realized much before? She was the one carrying their son, so maybe, to Karen, she still came before a baby that had yet to come to this world. She secretly wished this large hand spread in a protective way around her tummy was a good sign for their future as a family. As they finished their lunch, the rain kept falling continuously. It probably wouldn't stop for a while, either. Cassandra secretly hoped all this rain and the storm would slow the Imperial army as much as possible before they arrived there. Sherian, however, was sulking. As soon as that rain stops, Anur, we're leaving, she announced. Already? Asked the teenage boy, sulking a bit. We are not going on a holiday, remember? I want to hurry and go to the camp to whip them. Aren't you just going there to play? Said Anur. Kareen chuckled, but Sherian didn't answer that. Of course, the war god's army was probably doing just fine without her or even their commander-in-chief. The real threat would be the east, and Cassandra was in no hurry to have Karen go there. Once their lunch was finished, Karen and his sister had to talk over military matters, so Cassandra went back first to finally change into warmer clothes. She carefully hung her green ceremony clothes where she could see them, as if that would make the dream last a bit longer. She took a bath to clean and warm herself up first, and put on a new pink dress, with a light fur cloak, as the rain was keeping the temperature low. Between the hot and dry weather of the capital, the humidity of the Diamond Palace, and the cold of the Onyx Castle, Cassandra felt like she could get sick very easily. Hence, she made sure to cover herself, and drank some more warm tea. She had another intention while going back to her room, and that was writing her letters. She asked for some ink and parchment. She wrote a long letter to Evan first, wondering if the imperial servant would be happy to hear any news from her. He was the most serious man she had ever met, but she kind of liked him. He had been of great help back when she lived at the camp with Karen. She was hoping to get some news from the Red Room as well, see if her medical teaching had done some good there. What she had heard from the Emperor in the capital wasn't enough. Cassandra was hoping to hear more from Evan directly. She also added some more recommendations, about some herbs she remembered seeing there but hadn't taught them to use yet. She ended her letter wishing him well. After that, her next letters were for Orwen, the blacksmith apprentice, and the servants of the Onyx Castle. She was curious to know how they were all doing. She missed Nebarim most, as her first friend there. They had a rocky start, but she truly appreciated her honest nature. Cassandra took her time to let her friend know most of what had happened for her and realized that, once it was put on the paper, it was indeed quite a lot. Finally, Cassandra wrote some shorter letters to the younger servants, and Petrina, the head maid there. You look busy. She smiled, feeling two sturdy arms around her waist as she was writing the last couple of sentences. Karen put his face into her neck, letting her finish. Once she was done, Cassandra put her letters to the side for the servants to collect and turned to him. What about you, my prince? Did you finish discussing war with your sister? Karen suddenly put on a grumpy front, surprising her a little. Don't you have something else to call me now? You mean, Almien, said Cassandra with a chuckle. Karen nodded, and leaned in to kiss her, satisfied. That's right, your man. Karen's kiss was gentle, slow, and sweet. Cassandra couldn't help but smile against his lips. Now that she was done with her letters, she wrapped her arms around his neck and let him pull her close, standing up and guiding her to their bed. Karen's hands on her skin were warm, so warm that her skin would get little goosebumps from that delicious warm sensation. She loved the familiar smell of the war god. Her heart sank when Cassandra realized that, in a few days, she would have to say goodbye and wouldn't be able to enjoy this for a few weeks. Hence, she was even thirstier for his kisses than usual, caressing his neck and brushing his hair. She suddenly stopped, though, looking at it. What is it? Would you let me cut your hair? She asked in a soft voice. My hair? Yes, do you mind? Karen shook his head, and kissed her forehead. Of course, he didn't care at all. The war god never really bothered about his hair. The lustrous black hair was usually pushed back on his shoulders, he never really cared to cut it. His mother would do it for him from time to time, but there was really no particular attachment from him. He didn't care what Cassandra would do with it. Taking off the green cloth from his shoulders, Cassandra hung it next to hers, but as she did, Karen frowned. Wait, I forgot about this, he said. He stood and walked to one of the bags they had taken back from the palace, searching for something, and eventually pulled out a little dagger from it, handing it to her. The blade was wrapped in a thick leather cloth, but Cassandra took it out carefully. I've seen it before, said Cassandra, observing the weapon with a frown. It was Phaedra's. I modified it to make it a better weapon, and lighter too. Keep it with you. Cassandra was surprised to receive the weapon of her enemy. Indeed, the dagger had changed a bit since Phaedra had tried to harm her with it. She vaguely remembered Karen working on it while she was making the decoction for Miss Sandra's injuries, but she hadn't really paid much attention back then, and somehow forgot about it. Now, she could observe it a bit more carefully. The war god had removed all the unnecessary decorations, gems, and gold for which neither of them cared, and sharpened it. Cassandra couldn't yield one of Karen's swords, as they were way too heavy for her thin build, but this little dagger was indeed just the right weight in her hand. She could move it easily, though she hadn't much knowledge about how to use a dagger. She slid her finger on the blade, but avoided the edge. It was obvious this had been sharpened with precision, and she didn't want to cut herself. Can I cut your hair with this? You can tame it this way. Cassandra chuckled. She actually liked the symbolism behind keeping this weapon. The young concubine insisted on washing his hair first. Then, Karen sat on the floor next to her, as even on a stool he would have been too tall for her. Cassandra was a bit excited to cut her prince's hair, but she had to think about what she wanted to do first. Karen's hair had grown long, it fell below his shoulders. She knew that length wasn't comfortable for him to fight with. She combed his hair with her fingers first, pushing it back, and trimmed the ends a bit. Then, she decided to shave the sides. She had seen some men with this haircut at the camp. She proceeded carefully. Indeed, the blade was very sharp. Cassandra had to proceed slowly, as she was agonizing over the idea of cutting him. It took longer than she had thought because of that, but once she was done, the shaved sides pleased her a lot. She carefully kept his freshly cut hair, too, putting it in a little napkin on the side. Then, she put the dagger down on its leather wrapping, and braided the hair left on top of his head, which was still plenty and long enough to fall between his shoulder blades. Then, she decided to tie it with some little gold rings she had in her chest, that she would probably never use. Once she was done, she stepped back a little and looked at the result, satisfied. "What do you think?" she asked. "Do my beard, too?" Cassandra laughed. His heavy beard indeed felt a bit too much now that his sides were shaven. She grabbed the dagger again, observing it to think about what she should do. "I need to think about it. Just shave it. I like your beard though." "Then just shave what you don't like. It's too long." Cassandra chuckled. "Aren't you a fussy customer, Prince Karen?" "I'll pay you, then." "How much would you pay me?" asked Cassandra, as she started trimming his beard. "A gold bar." She laughed. "I would be the most overpaid barber in the empire." "It's fine." Cassandra shook her head, and focused on the trimming. It was his gold anyway. She knew very well he didn't care much about it. The imperial family was way too rich to really care. She focused on his beard, cutting it but leaving some, as she loved the spiky feeling of it. Once she was done, she had cut about 2/3 of it, but still leaving about half an inch for herself to play with. "All right, we are done," she said with a satisfied smile. Karen nodded, checking his newly trimmed beard with his fingers. Cassandra knew he was satisfied as he didn't ask her to cut more. She put her dagger down, and went to gather the hair she had collected in a napkin. Then, she very carefully started wetting it in the little basin and braided it. Karen frowned a bit, wondering what she was doing now. She even got up several times to look through her little chest full of jewelry she seldom used. Once she was done, Cassandra proudly showed it to him. She had made a bracelet of his cut hair, adding some of her little gold rings to it. Karen was surprised. She finished knotting the silky black hair around her wrist, around the thread from their ceremony, and it was clear it wouldn't come off unless cut. "Did you intend to make this from the start?" he asked, stroking the little bracelet. "Yes. Your hair is very long, and I like it. It will be my memento for when you're gone." He nodded, a bit curious. Then, his eyes went to her hair, frowning. "Do you want one from me too?" asked Cassandra, reading his mind easily. "I don't want you to cut your hair." She chuckled and grabbed the dagger again. Karen was frowning, but Cassandra knew very well he loved her long hair, and had no intention to cut it short either. Instead, she grabbed a strand around her nape, where it wouldn't be seen. She cut a good portion of it. Her hair was long enough, and that bunch alone would suffice. "Will a bracelet fit you?" she asked, a bit unsure. "Can you braid it into my hair?" Cassandra immediately loved the idea. She checked the braids she had done in Karen's hair, and worked around it. The final result was actually surprisingly beautiful. From what she had done before, the black braids on his head were fading into her dark brown strands, and falling a bit lower down his back. It looked like his hair was naturally fading into hers, and the now rather long braids down his back were quite beautiful and unique. She had a wide smile observing the result. The war god, too, grabbed the braids to look at it, stroking the dark brown strands with his fingers. "Are you happy with it, dear customer?" Cassandra asked. "Very," he replied with a nod. He pulled her in for a kiss, now that they were done with the hairstyling fun. Cassandra was so happy, she wished those few days of peace together could last forever. She felt safe wherever the prince was, even more so when they were staying at the Diamond Palace. This rain ceremony had been a dream come true, so simple yet so beautiful. She didn't know if Karen grasped the full extent of this vow, how much it meant for her, but she was satisfied enough to have been bonded with him in the ways of her people. She didn't want to take this silk thread or her newly made hair bracelet off, ever. Even if they had to part soon, she knew she'd cherish it and comfort herself with it. She was just so eager to enjoy all of him while she still could. She kissed him back, so eager and demanding. She would never get tired of this man. Especially since she really liked that new hairdo. Karen looked even manlier, if possible. He truly looked like a god of war, like this. He wasn't a particularly handsome man, but Cassandra had grown to love his strong jaw, his obsidian eyes, and his features. His muscles, too. She was never into burly men, but Karen's powerful arms just ignited all of her desires so easily, with those large hands. She would blush every time he caressed her, her body so conditioned to his touch after all of those hours of love-making. There was something about knowing those were their last days together for a while. Somehow, she didn't want to let go of him, not yet. Her whole world had been spinning around this man for several months now. The weeks without him had been hard. Now, how long would she have to wait until the next time they could be together again? Hence, for once Cassandra wasn't too shy about taking the lead. She pushed him gently on the bed, and of course, her prince wouldn't reject her. Karen actually liked to see her act a little bit bolder, to let her take the lead in bed. They had made love so many times, their bodies didn't hold many secrets from each other. Cassandra sat across his hips, while Karen pulled them both into the middle of the bed. She felt a bit guilty about having sex after they both just changed, but it was a bit too late to reconsider. Their passionate kissing wasn't giving much room for her to think, and her skin was burning up already. She undid the laces of her dress, and helped her prince take off his pants. Within a few minutes, they had their skins against each other, and no piece of clothing left. Cassandra kept caressing the long, freshly cut braid on Karen's back. She really liked his new hairdo, and her fingertips would caress his head, feel the bare parts behind his ears, caress it down to his nape, then find the braid, trace it back to the top, and redo that gesture, over and over again. "Stop that!" Cassandra frowned, a bit surprised. She tilted her head, but when she tried to pass her fingers behind his ears again, Karen avoided it. She chuckled. "Don't tell me, it tickles. Just stop." Cassandra laughed. Who could have known the war god was ticklish behind his ears? Cassandra slowly woke up to some rummaging behind the door. She frowned, wondering what was going on. If she focused enough, she could hear a bit of the conversation. "But it's been 2 days. I told you, they are fine." Just leave it here. They eat it, don't they? Just come and clean it up later. Don't disturb them, they'll come out when they have had enough. Oh. I see. Cassandra sighed and snuggled inside Karen's arms. Had it been 2 days already? They hadn't parted and left the bed except for taking the trays of food inside and back outside. Her last 3 nights and 2 days had been filled with love. She felt like they had gone into their own little bubble, away from time. Or maybe just trying to forget about time. She wasn't ready to part with him yet, but she probably never would be. Karen's slow breathing above her head made her a bit sad. She didn't want to have to sleep alone, without the sounds of her partner beside her. He had become everything to her. The fact that she knew this was going to come to an end was devastating her, making it so much worse. She didn't know when, she just knew that it was going to happen soon. Cassandra hated the wait. The only way for her to forget was to sleep with her prince. Somehow, she hated feeling depressed before he was even gone. She sat on the bed, sighing and pushing her hair away from her face. Of course, behind her, Karen immediately reacted, and came to wrap her in his arms. What is it? He whispered against her ear. I need to do something. I'm going to go crazy if I just stay here thinking about how you're going to leave soon. Are you sad? I don't think I'm sad, yet. Cassandra turned around, kissing him gently, brushing his beard with her fingers. It had already grown back a little. Then, she took a deep breath and smiled softly. I'll be all right. Just focus on the war, and I will focus on our baby. Karen nodded, agreeing with her. Cassandra gently kissed him again and left the bed to go and see what clothes she could put on. She didn't want to stay locked in this room anymore. It had been a bit too long already, and she didn't want to be rude to their host, Lady Karine, or make her sister unhappy. Karen grabbed the food tray to bring inside while she washed using the little water basin, and they ate together in silence. When they were both full, dressed, and ready to go, they walked out of the bedroom. The Diamond Palace was actually rather quiet. First, Cassandra wanted to go and check on the dragon egg. It was a bit of a funny feeling, but she felt like she had neglected her baby by not going to see the egg for a while. Once they got there, to her surprise, Cray was wrapped around it sleeping. She chuckled. The black dragon woke up, and watched her come close, but did not want to leave its egg, letting Cassandra approach instead. She got on her knees right next to the dragon, and Cray's snout sniffed her belly, rubbing against her dress curiously. She scratched the dark snout a bit, but her hand was busier touching the egg. It was still warm, with this strange light moving inside. It was almost as if something was beating inside. Actually, the egg seemed even warmer than she remembered, almost hot now. How many more weeks until she gave birth? At this rate, it would be burning hot before her baby was born. Cray softly growled when Karen approached, and the war god also scratched its head. It was rare for the two to interact directly. Cassandra watched them for a while, but she was more distracted by the egg. She had grown attached to it a lot, and couldn't wait to meet both the baby dragon and her baby. The egg was already so big, she wondered what size a newborn dragon could be. Maybe it was half full of liquid in there, or maybe the baby dragon was already as big as that. "Oh, look who finally came out of the den." They turned around. Kareen was just at the entrance of the garden, followed by some servants carrying meat. She smiled widely and walked up to them. Cray, excited, suddenly got up, smelling the meat. "Good morning, Lady Kareen," said Cassandra. "Good morning, dear. You look well rested." Cassandra blushed a bit. The imperial concubine couldn't ignore that they had just spent 2 days in bed. Of course, she would be rested, having done nothing but sleep and the rest. "How come you are feeding Cray here?" asked Cassandra, a bit curious. The dragon would usually leave the Diamond Palace, or wherever they were staying, to go and feed by itself. It was a good enough hunter to provide for itself. It only came around to steal some meat from their meals out of gluttony, not hunger. "That big boy doesn't need me," laughed Kareen. "This is for Sry. Sry, come here baby." Suddenly, a purple dragon's head popped up from behind Cray. Cassandra hadn't noticed Sry was here. The other dragon was so tiny, Cray's body could easily hide it. Sry climbed over its younger brother, and wiggled all the way to Lady Kareen, though Cray was right behind, the ruby eyes fixed on the meat. "Don't move, Cray," said Kareen with her motherly voice. The black dragon growled softly, sulking a bit, but stayed where it was, with no choice but to watch its older brother eat the meat. Sry's owner had died at 6 years old. Would that mean her future baby dragon was going to be even tinier than that? Cassandra couldn't be sure, though. Sephir and Vrihan's dragons were both smaller than Cray. It was really too hard to say, though Lady Kareen had hinted before that their dragon would probably be on the bigger side. "Stop sulking you big boy, you should go out and hunt if you're hungry," said Kareen, scolding Cray who was still growling, upset. "Didn't he go hunting yet today?" asked Cassandra. "He went this morning, but he's been glued to his egg for as long as you two were locked in that room. He only leaves it to go hunting. I don't know what's wrong with him." Karen. Both women turned to the war god, but Karen stayed mute, looking at the egg with a little frown. Cassandra, however, was the quickest to understand what was going on. They didn't want to leave. Just like Karen had kept her in the bedroom for 3 nights and 2 days, Cray didn't want to part with its egg. The dragon probably didn't want to part with Cassandra, either. The pair were dreading this war, unwilling to part with their loved ones. This truth hit Cassandra right in the heart. She hadn't realized before. Because her prince seldom showed his feelings and was always so attached to her anyway, she hadn't even thought about how he could feel about leaving her here in the Diamond Palace. She had focused on her own feelings alone, and only realized now how selfish and self-centered that was of her. Karen was the one who had to leave. He was the one who would have to go to war, to fulfill his duty as the third prince, the god of war of the Dragon Empire, while she'd stay back. Cassandra would be safe here in the Diamond Palace, while her lover was sent to the front line. Underneath the armor, the war god was a man. Just a man, who had learned to muffle his feelings his whole life. However, Cray was a mirror of its owner's feelings. It didn't want to leave them. Cassandra got up and walked up to him, putting her arms around his chest, hugging him gently. Karen didn't answer much, aside from putting his hand on her lower back, and playing with her hair. "Oh, I like this new hairstyle, son," said Kareen, inspecting it from a bit closer. "Perfect for going to war." "It better be soon," yelled someone behind her. Sherian appeared, stealing some meat from the dragons. Cassandra frowned a bit, as it was raw meat, but obviously, the princess couldn't care less and was eating it directly off the bone. Lady Kareen clicked her tongue. "Sherian, your manners." "I am starving, mother. I trained all morning with those useless guards of yours, they better get back in shape before I come back, or I'll have all those replaced. Anyway, is the honeymoon over you too? I hope you do know you can't put another baby in before this one is out, though, right?" Cassandra decided to ignore her. She was used to Sherian's crude ways by now, and she was almost expecting it at this point. "Enough, enough. I'm hungry, too. Let's have a late morning brunch, before you end up fighting with my babies," said Kareen, walking back inside. Cassandra chuckled. Anything was an excuse to have brunch for Lady Kareen, as she liked holding big feasts for breakfast no matter how late or early in the day it was. Hearing her call both dragons her babies was so endearingly cute. They all walked back inside, but to Cassandra's surprise, though Miss Andra and Dahlia were here, Anur didn't show up. When she asked about it, Miss Andra frowned, and Sherian chuckled. "The young ones had a bit of a fight last night, so he's been sulking. Don't worry, that big baby will show up eventually." "A fight? What did you fight with Anur about?" asked Cassandra, turning to Miss Andra. Her younger sister pouted a bit. "He kept saying how a woman will always be weaker than a man, and wouldn't change his mind. So, I challenged him." "You fought with Anur?" "Miss Andra." "What? I lost anyway," protested the younger sister. Sherian laughed loudly. "You barely lost, and that's what upset Anur. He struggled so much not to hurt you he got a big black eye, so now he is reflecting." "Well done, by the way, Missy." "Stop calling me that," whispered Miss Andra with a cute pout. Cassandra couldn't help but smile, thinking about how her younger sister had learned from her mistakes and was finally changing her attitude towards the imperial family. Of course, she shouldn't fight, but from what she had heard, this was just normal bickering between teenagers. They set up for another brunch in one of the gardens, and Cassandra finally felt a bit better than before. Maybe staying in bed for so long had gotten to her. She felt better now, sitting in the garden, breathing in some fresh air, and spending time with everyone. Suddenly, loud noises were heard from the outside. The ruckus had lots of people cheering and applauding. A servant came running inside the garden, but they all already knew what was going on. "The Imperial Army has arrived, Your Highnesses. They are asking to see the third Prince Karen, the war god of the Dragon Empire." Cassandra's heart sank at those words. The army had arrived even faster than she thought. Somehow, Karen, Anur, and Sherian got ready to leave incredibly fast. A couple of representatives from the army showed up, but there wasn't much time to lose. The news from the Eastern Front wasn't good, they had to go as fast as possible. Hence, there wasn't much ceremony involved, but everything was done in sad silence. Once everything was packed and ready, all dragons and humans gathered at the entrance of the Diamond Palace. Cassandra could even feel Cray's unhappiness, as the dragon was lethargic, its head turned towards the direction of the egg. The young concubine approached the dragon, scratching its maw gently. "Don't worry. I'll take care of our babies," she whispered to him. The dragon growled sadly, rubbing its head against her belly. She stayed there until Karen had said goodbye to his mother, and finally turned to her. She sighed, but she couldn't say a word. Her throat was already choked up, despite her best attempt not to cry. The prince gently took her in his arms. Cassandra hid her face in his shoulder, trying to inhale deeply, to remember his smell and his warmth. She really wasn't ready to let go. "Stay safe," he whispered to her. "Take care of yourself and the baby. Eat well, sleep well. I'll be back soon." "I know." She wanted to tell him the same, to stay safe and healthy, but the words didn't come. Instead, she started tearing up, and raised her eyes to look at him. She was going to miss him so much, again. Finally, she put her hands on his face, and kissed him longingly. This was going to be their last kiss for a long time. She needed that taste on her lips to linger for as long as possible. "By the great golden dragon, how much cheesier and mushier can you two get?" "All right, that's it, I'm out of here," declared Sherian. The two lovers separated slowly, and Karen put one last kiss on her forehead. "I'll be back soon," he repeated. Cassandra nodded sadly, and took a couple of steps back. Karine came to her side, putting an arm around her shoulder as they watched Karen, Sherian, Anur, and the two dragons fly away, leading the army. Cassandra broke down in tears a few minutes later. After Karen's departure, Cassandra was sad for a couple of days. However, she knew she couldn't stay like that forever. Once she was done crying, she tried to spend time with Karine, Miss Andra, and Dahlia, and keep herself busy. Somehow, they all cooperated to keep her occupied. Lady Karine was used to her children being gone and having to find hobbies for herself. As it turned out, she was rather busy as the city's owner and mayor already, but she still found time to have other hobbies. She liked painting and tried to talk Cassandra into it. Though the young concubine wasn't fond of it, Miss Andra was interested, and even proved herself to be a good student. Eventually, Cassandra was used as a model a couple of times, as it allowed her to rest yet spend time chatting with them. There was something else Lady Karine did for her, however. Somehow, the imperial concubine was well aware of Karen's present for Cassandra in the imperial palace, and decided to give her a little garden in the Diamond Palace, too. This was probably the most successful attempt at cheering Cassandra up. Once she started taking care of her plants, studying the books she was given about them, or writing herself, Cassandra didn't notice the hours pass by. Miss Andra would join her often, to learn from her, as well as share her knowledge on the matter. Somehow, the two sisters started working on new hybrid species, trying to grow sprouts that would survive in the shadelands. This little project was keeping Cassandra busy, and also helping her remember that, sometime soon, she would be able to go back to the Onyx Castle with Karen. Anything was good to keep herself busy. She'd write, chat with Karine and Miss Andra, work on her plants, write about new medicines, go to the local markets, study more books, and find more things to keep herself busy with. That workaholic behavior of hers started worrying Corinne and Miss Andra a bit, as it never seemed like the young concubine took a break, despite her belly growing quickly. Cassandra was busy, too busy. She'd spend all day working on one thing and then another, only stopping to eat. The imperial concubine was starting to dislike this obsessive behavior and insisted on Miss Andra and Dahlia watching her more closely. However, one day, Corinne unexpectedly found her napping in the dragon eggs garden. Cassandra was wrapped up in a warm blanket and had fallen asleep with some of her notes, right next to the egg. The discreet Dahlia was watching her from afar, making sure she wouldn't get sick. She silently smiled at Lady Corinne when their eyes met, meaning she already knew about Cassandra's little naps. After that, the imperial concubine decided not to be on Cassandra's back so much. When she wasn't constantly watched, Cassandra would eventually take breaks by herself, always agreeing to Dahlia's suggestion for some tea, or a stroll in the gardens. Unknown to Corinne, however, the hardest times for Cassandra were at night. The young concubine hadn't imagined she would have so much trouble falling asleep by herself. The idea of going back to an empty bed haunted her every day after dusk. She would drag on the time to go back to her bedroom, find excuses to stay up late with Lady Corinne or her notes, and when she had no choice but to go, she'd turn sad and silent. Dahlia had set up a little routine for her, where the young concubine would take a long hot bath in her bedroom, and chat with her about her day. Helping Cassandra bathe, wash her hair, and brush it before bed, somehow helped her get sleepy and fall asleep more easily. The weather was getting a bit colder, so Dahlia brought in little scented candles, finding the ones that supposedly helped with insomnia. Her pregnancy was also a big help in keeping Cassandra from doing too much and tiring herself out. Somehow, reaching the 7th month made her more tired than ever before, and she started taking naps by herself. Her growing, large belly was incapacitating her in several ways, giving Dahlia and Miss Andra more excuses to stay around and help her. Eventually, Cassandra's sadness passed. She wasn't over Karen's absence, but at least she had reverted back to her old self and didn't look as sad or on the verge of crying anymore. Truth was, Cassandra had spent many nights crying silently, but she couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't stand being a shadow of herself. She was even more worried it would impact her baby negatively. From then on, she started every day with a big breath, something to look forward to, and did her best to live her days eating well and resting well, as she had promised her prince. When she missed him, she'd caress the little bracelet of hair around her wrist, or go to see the dragon's egg. Somehow, Cassandra got a bit better by herself, and life went on for everyone at the Diamond Castle. After a few more weeks, however, Cassandra could tell something was wrong. There was no way Corinne hadn't gotten any news about the Eastern War yet. It had been more than 2 months already. When she mentioned it to her, the imperial concubine always pretended like she was going to ask about it soon, or was waiting to hear from some of her spies. Cassandra couldn't take it anymore. After a while, she had even received answers from the people at the Onyx Castle and the North Army camp by a normal message carrier service. There was no way Corinne had absolutely no news about the war against the Eastern Republic. That morning, she insisted once again, and this time persisted until she got the truth, with Miss Sandra's support. After half an hour of arguing, Kareen was exasperated. You're so stubborn. I need to know the truth. I know my prince is out there fighting. I can wait, but I can't stand not having any news, and I know you must have some information. That is all I ask, Lady Kareen. The imperial concubine looked like she was about to throw her cup of tea across the room. Instead, she slammed it on the table, and rolled her eyes. Gosh, I didn't think you could be as stubborn as my children. Fine, I will tell you. Really? So you know something? Of course I do. Who do you think I am? There isn't a city in this empire I don't have a spy in. Anyway, I did get some news half a month ago. While Sherian is perfectly fine in the north, on Karen's side, the Eastern Army somehow got further into our territory than we thought. The capital was actually notified very late of the attack. Someone there didn't, or couldn't, do their job correctly. By the time Karen got there, the situation was very messy, and you can't have a dragon simply burn everything down when your enemies are spread in your own city, among our people. Oh God, no, whispered Cassandra, shocked. She hadn't imagined the situation was that bad. All this time, Sherian and Karen had made it sound like this would be a simple task that would be solved easily. Cassandra had no idea the front line was in such a bad situation, even before Karen had gotten there. That's why things are complicated. He has to wipe out the enemy and push them back to the frontier, but those imbecile Republicans have realized that Kree won't attack, or at least fire, while they are still inside the Dragon Empire. So all of their strategies seem to focus on staying in. Since when does the Eastern Republic know so much about dragons? Asked Miss Andra. Those tactics don't sound like theirs at all. I know, sighed Kareen. That is what worries me. I wouldn't be surprised if a little rat had gone ahead to give them those bad ideas. Lady Kareen, do you think the second prince could have? However, the imperial concubine raised her hand to stop Cassandra. Let's be careful and keep what we think to ourselves for now. I already wrote to the imperial palace, but that snake Vrihan hasn't left his apartments there since we left. Apparently on the pretense of looking after his sister. He definitely has people to do it for him, said Miss Andra. Everyone knows the IMP. I mean, people like him never dirty their hands themselves. Kareen smiled, but this was more of a scary smile than a heartfelt smile, and nodded. That's right, dear. Just like me, he probably has people working for him. Vrihan is much smarter than Fitra. She's the type who will dirty her own hands, if she's pushed over the limit. However, Vrihan learned a lot from his snake mother. He loves to scheme and get rid of people who annoy him without leaving traces. You can never, ever be alone with him or his people. I don't believe he'd stay locked up under the Emperor's nose only for his sister's sake, either. This sounds too much like some trick he'd be pulling off. Can't we do anything? Asked Cassandra. I have sent people to watch him, but he probably knows that too. In any case, Vrihan won't move until he's sure he can win, and I don't see how he could do that. No matter what, my son is the war god. He won't lose a war just because it started late. Cassandra slowly nodded, but she didn't feel reassured. Karen wasn't like Vrihan, someone who'd plot behind people's backs, and use underhanded methods. She tried to think of several scenarios. Somehow, she felt it was unlikely her prince would die in this war. What could Vrihan do? Send an assassin, or worse, find some way to poison him? Cassandra knew that dragon tamers like Karen were more resistant to poison, but no matter how strong his body was, there was only so much a man could withstand. Cassandra hated not being able to do anything for him. She suddenly stood up, surprising both women in the room. Karine sighed. "We are not done with brunch, dear. I've had enough, Lady Karine, thank you. Do you think you could have something delivered to the front, if I was to give it to you?" "Of course, dear. What are you thinking about now?" Cassandra took a deep breath. The idea had just popped up into her head. "I'll prepare some first aid kits for the military." "First aid kits? For the front? Those men in the Imperial Army aren't trained to do any medical procedures, dear." "It's fine, they won't need training, just common sense. If I taught the men in the North Army camp, I can have those men at the Eastern Front learn too, even without being there." Miss Andra, smiling widely, and got up too, her excitement evident. "I love that idea, Hainu. I'll help you." "Oh, you young ones are so full of energy," sighed Karine. "Anyway, Cassandra, I assigned your servants to work for you before, didn't I? They have learned how to write and calculate already. Just have those girls come over and help you." "Thank you, Lady Karine. Can I entrust you with the transportation part?" "Of course, dear. As if this old lady would sit on her arse while my children fight here and there." Cassandra smiled. At times like this, Karine would be even nicer than usual, and hint at treating her and Miss Andra as her own daughters. The two sisters then left the garden they were eating in, though Dahlia packed up some more food for Cassandra to snack on later, and went to the little room next to Cassandra's garden, which had pretty much become her office. Behind her, Miss Andra was excited. "Do you already know what we will do? We need to list all kinds of injuries, diseases, and other health issues the soldiers in the front could face, how often, and find a way to resolve and treat any of them in a short amount of time." "All right," said Miss Andra, grabbing what she needed to write down. "We can start by listing all of the most common diseases in that part of the empire, common infections, and also some basic injury treatments they should use. Should we write some sort of instructions down to put in those kits? It's a battlefield, Miss Andra, they don't have time to read, and it may be that some of the soldiers don't even know how to read. So we need to make it as simple as possible. We can make drawings or use colors. When I worked in brothels, some of the girls weren't literate, but they knew which medicine to take based on their stamping or colors." "Right, we can use that. Do you still remember them? We need to think about how we can pack them in light, easily transportable ways." Just like that, both women started working together. Once they were done planning and compiling information, they brought their project to Karine, who gave her own opinion on it, and called in some of her personal soldiers, military as well, for them to give their input. Within a week, Cassandra, Miss Andra, and several more people started working hard on this. Karine had more than enough money to support their project and ship it to the front in record time. Not only did the young concubine have her hands full with this project, but the whole of the Diamond City became aware of the efforts made at the Diamond Palace, and offered to contribute to show their support to the soldiers in their own ways. An unprecedented event in the Dragon Empire. It took a couple more weeks for everything to be ready and the first samples to be sent to the front line. Eventually, Cassandra and Missandra had come up with little boxes in 2 sizes, one that could fit in a pocket and be carried by any soldier, and a bigger one, for the ones who could store it in their horses' satchels or inside a chariot. Those medical boxes included medicines, to treat the most common issues a soldier could encounter on the battlefield, from fevers to large injuries, with very little explanation. According to the captain of Kareen's guards, even the dumbest soldier could use it with confidence. The girls had come up with a compartment system and little images engraved in it, so the soldiers could find what they needed in one glance, even if they opened that box for the first time. The longest part had been to find out how to make everything in a tiny size, but Missandra was the one who found a way to make all the medicine into small and colored pills that wouldn't be crumbled by any rough movements. Cassandra had to come up with the improved medicine, compared to the Empire's old ones, and Missandra took care of finding out how to fit them inside. They also included some bandages and little bottles of alcohol to disinfect, making sure the smell was not the kind that would make the men want to drink it. The imperial concubine Kareen was most helpful in gathering the resources for all that. She spared no expenses to have all the bandages, medicines, or plants Cassandra needed be brought to the Diamond Palace. Even paying for the metal the boxes were shaped in, and every worker who participated in their large-scale production. Soon enough, news came from the imperial palace that the emperor knew of their project and would shoulder all the costs, which made Kareen laugh. She didn't dismiss the chests of gold bars that arrived in her garden the next morning, though, and even sent a personal letter to thank the emperor. Cassandra could easily picture the old man jumping around upon receiving a letter from the usually cold concubine. Even after everything was finalized, they didn't stop producing more. The first feedback from the front was very positive, but Cassandra read every letter very carefully to see where and how they could improve the kits. She realized they could even send bigger containers, and the army accountants could spread the contents depending on the situation. However, Missandra, Dahlia, and Kareen all stopped her from working on that new project. Cassandra's pregnancy was starting to make it too difficult for her to keep working like she was. Hence, Cassandra was almost locked away from the next steps of the box's preparations and found herself bored again. While Missandra worked hard in her stead, the sweet Dahlia stayed with her, or more exactly, watched her. Cassandra couldn't complain, however. Her belly was big and hindering her in many ways. She felt tired no matter how long she slept, and her back was aching constantly. Kareen gave her some hot balm to calm her pain, but even if Dahlia massaged her, it would only numb the pain for a short while. The only thing Cassandra was still authorized to do was taking care of her garden, and keeping her correspondence with her friends from the north. All of them answered her quite fast, and she was happy to get some news from Nebera and the girls, and from the camp. Evan was surprisingly diligent in telling her everything that was going on there, including how the Red Room had evolved. They now had a fully dedicated team taking care of it and applying all the instructions she had left in the letter. He would even include some more questions from them, compiling any issue they encountered for Cassandra to take care of from where she was. Orwen was now a full-time blacksmith and quite busy, but he never missed a chance to tell Cassandra about whatever happened on his side of the camp. The men there still called her the Lady of the Mountain, as if she had been some royalty by herself, instead of just the third prince's concubine. He even let her know about how Sherien's command had changed the camp, and how the young Anur was doing under his older sister's harsh training. It looked like the youngest prince wasn't particularly cut out for the military. However, no matter how fast they all tried to send their replies to her, it would take 10 to 12 days for the letters to be delivered, and that was a long time for Cassandra to wait. She hadn't realized how the dragon flights had modified her perception of distances, but now, it was cruelly showing. "Lady Karine, you called for me?" asked Cassandra one morning. For once, the imperial concubine wasn't interested in her brunch. Instead, she was walking in circles in the room, looking very disturbed. That wasn't like her at all, and Cassandra immediately knew something was wrong. Miss Andra arrived behind her sister, looking as confused as she was. On the side, a soldier was waiting, his head lowered, probably one of her spies. Finally, Karine sighed. "There is some bad news from the imperial palace. Prince Sephir died." "What?" exclaimed Cassandra, astonished. "What happened?" "Nothing is certain at the moment. The emperor has closed down the imperial palace for an investigation." "That doesn't sound like something they'd do for a natural death," whispered Miss Andra. "No, it isn't. Either the emperor suspects Sephir was murdered, or he wants to be sure he wasn't. Either way, the emperor will get to the root of it. I have a bad feeling about this." "Do you think he could really have been?" asked Cassandra. Karine hesitated a second, looking lost deep in her thoughts. She shrugged. "The timing is really off. Only 2 princes are in the capital at the moment, 2 are at the front, and the 5th went back to his own palace days before that. There is no way Orpheus has anything to do with it. He doesn't give a asterisk about becoming the emperor. The main suspects would be Vrihan, someone close to him, or one of the other concubines." "You really think one of the imperial concubines could be behind his death?" "I am not too sure. They might have thought it was a good time to get rid of him, with Karen, Sherien, and Anur gone. Sephir doesn't have many allies inside the imperial palace. Even Orpheus' mother could have acted without her son's knowledge, but those are all assumptions. I think Vrihan is preparing something." She turned to the soldier who was waiting to the side. "I want another report as soon as possible about this investigation. And don't lose Vrihan or his sister for 1 second." "Yes, Your Highness." The soldier rushed outside. Cassandra already knew Karine had an impressive network of spies, but she truly had no idea how it worked, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know either. Karine had probably dirtied her hands several times to protect herself and her children, and if she didn't talk about it with Cassandra, it meant she had no intention to. "Anyway," sighed the imperial concubine, "we will know more about this soon. The imperial palace will have to make an official statement. This is truly too sad. Sephir wouldn't have become an emperor, but he was a smart and gentle boy. His mother would have been. Oh, poor Safia. You knew his mother personally?" asked Cassandra. "She and I got pregnant around the same time, and we both lost children. She was gentler than me, and way too nice. She died in childbirth," sadly. Cassandra immediately thought about her own baby. She couldn't imagine her child growing up without her around. She had seen it many times, though. The streets of the capital were filled with orphan children, too young to fend for themselves, resorting to beggary or slavery to survive. Cassandra was well aware that even if no one attempted to kill her, she could die from childbirth, or natural causes. She only hoped that if anything happened, Karen and his family would take care of her son. "Have you heard anything from the concubines, Hainu?" asked Miss Andra. "Didn't you exchange letters with them lately?" Cassandra nodded. "The last letter I received was already 2 weeks ago, but the concubines were saying Prince Sephir was well. My remedies were helping with his dust disease, there was nothing alarming about his current state. Maybe something happened since, or he had a bad flare-up. Or maybe someone pulled some dirty strings," said Karine. "Anyway, there is no use thinking too much about it, it's all happening in the capital for now. Let's see in the upcoming weeks what becomes of it. However, be careful, dear. My spy also told me Fitra was getting back on her feet, and able to walk already." "What? Already?" exclaimed Miss Andra, shocked. "She is of dragon blood, just like Sherian. It's not that surprising that she can heal fast. It would have been more of a fuss for Karen to throw her out the window if she'd died." Cassandra didn't know if she should be happy or sad about this. She certainly didn't like the idea of Fitra getting back to her old self. The princess was definitely waiting to pay them back for what Karen had done to her. She may be healed, but this kind of pain wouldn't go away so easily. The young concubine sighed, and after breakfast was promptly eaten, she went back to her room. She needed to be alone for a while, and write to her prince. She had no idea if Karen received her letters at the front. She hadn't gotten any answer from all the letters she had sent, but she was hoping he was only too busy to answer. No matter if the prince received them or not, those letters had become her personal therapy. Writing to Karen every day, to let him know about what she had done that day, how she felt, how their baby and the dragon egg were growing, about her project of the medicinal box, they all made her feel so much better. It was her only getaway from the Diamond Palace. Anytime Cassandra tried to imagine what her prince could be doing at that moment, she imagined him on a throne, like the one in his tent in the North Camp, talking military strategies with some old general. She could only pray that he was doing fine, safe and unharmed, and winning this battle bit by bit. The news received by Lady Karine was all leaning that way, too. The Eastern Army was slowly losing ground to the war god's men, and his fierce dragon. Cassandra even heard about it when she'd go to the markets in the Diamond City. The locals all knew who she was and admired her a lot. Cassandra never went alone, and was always in a pink dress, but the merchants liked her very much. They were impressed to see a young concubine so graceful, gentle, and nice to the ordinary people, and would give her some extras at any given chance. Somehow, they had heard about her doings in the North Army camp, too, and her Lady of the Mountain nickname was now used here as well. Just like that, Cassandra was building her own reputation around the Diamond City, and she was told some rumors of how the war was going. Some merchants would congratulate her when it was known that the war god had freed another city. Some of the women would tell her to take care of herself and her baby, for when her beloved would come back. Truth was, under Corinne's impulse, the baby's room was already finished and full. The imperial concubine was eager for her first grandchild to be born and was overdoing it a bit, in Cassandra's opinion. First, the nursery was way too big, and full of toys for both the baby and the young dragon. It was almost ridiculous. Second, there were no less than 3 maids already hired to take care of her son, no matter how many times Cassandra argued that she wanted to take care of her son by herself, with maybe Dahlia's help from time to time. However, as the weeks passed, Cassandra was slowly getting used to the idea that Karen wouldn't be able to keep his promise. The war would still be raging when her baby would come into this world. Cassandra realized something was wrong a few days later, when, at dinner time, Lady Corinne barely ate anything, and looked extremely preoccupied. When she asked about it, the imperial concubine sighed. "I don't like this. I haven't heard from the spy I sent to the capital yet. He was supposed to be back last night, and he is usually never late. I sent another one to investigate, but I'm afraid Vrihan took this opportunity to purge his surroundings. I haven't received any non-official news from the Imperial Palace in a while, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all." Miss Andra and Cassandra exchanged glances, worried. For Corinne to be this upset was not reassuring at all. What if something bad had happened in the Imperial Palace? No matter how she thought about it, Cassandra knew the worst that could possibly happen was the Emperor's death. If the Dragon Emperor passed without having named an official heir yet, the eldest son would have to take over until the ministers elected the right heir. However, no one was blind. With Prince Zephyr dead, Vrihan was the next in line, and while Karen was away, he would definitely secure his position on the Golden Throne before his younger brothers could react. Cassandra was terrified just to think about this possibility. "Don't worry," said Lady Corinne. "I will go there myself if necessary, but I won't stay still. I already sent news of this to Sherian and Anur, just in case. Karen is stuck on the battlefront at the moment, but even so, Vrihan won't be stupid enough to try and act if Sherian is around. Aren't you afraid he'll try to harm her?" "He can try. My daughter is not so weak that she would submit to that snake." Cassandra sighed. She didn't believe Vrihan would have acted if he wasn't sure of himself. What was the point of killing Zephyr now? Was it because Karen was away? This felt terribly wrong. Things were not in the best state right now, and even at the Diamond Palace, they weren't fully safe. Cassandra put a hand on her belly. She really didn't need any additional stress right now. She took a deep breath. Anyway, the second prince wouldn't be able to do much as long as the emperor was alive and well. Prince Zephyr's death was truly sad, but for now, they had yet to confirm the cause. Perhaps they would hear it was a natural cause soon, and Corinne's spy would return with a good explanation. Despite Corinne doing her best to act normal and not show how uneasy she was, Cassandra knew this was only to keep them from worrying too much. For Lady Corinne to be worried meant something was really wrong, and Cassandra felt it too. She tried to convince herself that there was nothing more she could do, as she walked to the little garden where, as always, the dragon egg was steadily growing. Her project with the medical boxes was going well too. Cassandra could just oversee it and let Miss Andra take care of managing the flow of supplies sent, their people, and the stocks coming in and out. There really wasn't much to do for her, aside from taking it easy for the last weeks of her pregnancy and taking care of her plants. Thankfully, the baby was doing well. Corinne had hired a midwife from the city to take care of Cassandra, and be ready for when the day would come, but once again, the young concubine didn't like all the extra attention. She could feel her son, very well, alive and kicking. It was probably what rejoiced her the most these days. Feeling her baby move. Every time he did, Cassandra took a minute to caress her belly. Sometimes, she would even talk to him. So much so that even Corinne, Miss Andra, and Dahlia had started talking about the baby as if he was here too. Cherien's answer arrived a few days later in the form of a letter, around dinner. A servant brought it to Corinne, who put her cup down and opened it right away, reading the content quickly. Apparently, Cherien is busy in the north, too. The barbarians heard of the Eastern Republic attacking and thought this would be an opportunity for them. HPMF. Anyway, Cherien says she will have settled this soon and will arrive here in 10 days. Oh, that letter is from 4 days ago, so less than a week now. Fine. Cassandra felt a bit better after hearing this. Even if it wasn't Karen, Cherien's presence would definitely make her feel more secure. These days, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad was going to happen. However, now it would only be a matter of waiting a few more days and. My lady. One of Corinne's servants rushed into the garden, out of breath. He almost fell on his knees at her feet, sweating and looking panicked. What is it? Asked Corinne, unhappy. They. His Highness the Second Prince just arrived at the Diamond Palace. He is here to arrest the Lady of the Mountain. Next to Cassandra, Miss Andra jumped on her feet like a cat, all her senses alert. All the servants around too exchanged glances, and a couple of them ran inside to go and check. What is this nonsense? Roared Corinne, slamming her cup on the table and getting up too. They say she is an accomplice in the first prince's murder. I don't have the details yet, but madam, the second prince will really be here any second. Cassandra, let's go, said Miss Andra, grabbing her sister's hand. But no, the young one is right, dear, said Corinne, gently pushing her towards the end of the garden. Follow me. While the servants hurried to take the remains of their dinner out of sight, Corinne led the two girls further into the garden, rushing between the trees towards one side. They were almost running. Cassandra's heart was thumping like crazy. What would she be arrested for? An accomplice to Prince Saphir's murder? What had taken place at the palace for this to happen? The imperial concubine suddenly stopped in front of one of the walls surrounding the garden they were in and pushed some of the ivy covering it like a large curtain. To their surprise, it revealed a long and wide crack in the stone wall. It was tight, but definitely an entrance wide enough for them to sneak into. Miss Andra and Cassandra exchanged a glance, shocked. They had walked by that wall 1,000 times but had never noticed this secret opening. Corinne pushed Miss Andra in, and they helped Cassandra get inside right behind her. Stay hidden here for now, whispered the imperial concubine. This is a secret passage only a handful of my servants know of. If things go wrong, start leaving through there immediately. This will lead to a secret room. I had everything prepared for you there, just in case. This place leads to the back garden. You can. Before she could finish that sentence, a ruckus was heard from behind her, and Corinne left quickly to see what was going on, while the two sisters retreated a bit. Miss Andra grabbed her older sister's shaking hand. For a few seconds, everything was silent in the palace. Then, soldiers barged into the garden, surrounding the imperial concubine. Cassandra retreated further as she could hear men stepping close to their hideout, but she could barely see what was going on behind the thick curtain of ivy. However, the two of them were able to hear very well when Corinne started yelling furiously. "What is this? How dare you barge into my palace?" "Good evening, imperial concubine," replied a cold voice. Cassandra shivered and retreated another step. That was definitely Vrihan's voice. Next to her, Miss Andra was livid, her hand covering her mouth. Everything was so calm just a few minutes ago, but now they were kept hidden while the second prince had taken control over the palace. "We are looking for a criminal, and I have the Emperor's permission to do anything in my power to bring her to the imperial palace, safe and unharmed." From his voice, Cassandra wouldn't even have trusted him for a second. How could the Emperor trust Vrihan with that task? She knew that, despite the Emperor's best intentions, Vrihan would have no second thoughts in killing her and the baby she was carrying at the first opportunity he'd get, and any witnesses along with her. She could easily imagine him reporting some unfortunate incident to the Emperor. There was no way Cassandra would ever give that man any chance to touch her, no way. "What does it have to do with me? This is my diamond palace. How dare you come and chase some criminal here? On what grounds?" Cassandra realized Lady Corinne was trying to play dumb on purpose, to get more information on what was really going on. It may win them some time, too. Behind her, Miss Andra was gently pulling on her hand, trying to bring Cassandra away from the opening, but she wanted to listen to what was going on. "The said criminal is none other than Karen's favorite, imperial concubine. I know she is here. Your son wouldn't entrust his woman to anyone else." "Oh? And what did she do for you to arrest her?" "She is suspected of taking part in the first prince's tragic death. One of his concubines poisoned him with some plants that the slave gave her." Cassandra was astonished. "The recipes she gave the concubines? Is that what Vrihan was chasing her for?" Even if one of the concubines had meddled with the content of the teas, she had nothing to do with it. This was obviously his scheme to capture her. Did he poison Zephyr's drink himself? What had happened to his concubines? Were they to be interrogated, too? How ridiculous! What would Cassandra poison Prince Zephyr for? Well, anyone can be greedy at some point. Who knows what a woman? How dare you speak about greed? If anyone has that kind of dirt in their mind, it would be anyone but my son or his concubine. You, of all people, are the last one who can accuse others of that. Watch your words, Corinne. I am not. It's imperial concubine Corinne to you, little runt. Or do you think you can insult the imperial dragon's favorite to her face? Hey! A tense silence reigned after her words, but Cassandra could feel Vrihan's anger from here. Lady Corinne's nerves were really made of steel, to confront him like that. Cassandra was fearful for her, but she was well aware the imperial concubine would never submit to Vrihan, or do anything other than protect her children. Enough, bring that woman here, yelled Vrihan. Have you heard anything about a pregnant woman being here, Vrihan? Did you question the people? Investigate? She isn't here. Karen took her to the Onyx Castle. Cassandra could barely breathe. What if Vrihan's soldiers really interrogated the people of the Diamond City? Would they say the Lady of the Mountain was indeed here? Or had they tried already? She knew the local folks liked her very much, but would they lie to an imperial prince? You're lying, suddenly yelled a feminine voice. I already know you wanted that slut to stay with you until she gave birth. Their dragon egg is here. Cassandra's heart dropped. Phaedra was here too? That woman was already able to travel? Cassandra suddenly froze at the mention of the dragon egg. They could never leave this palace with it if they had to flee this place. Do you see a concubine here, other than me? How dare you bother this old woman without any proof? I will have my proof once I find this woman. I know you're hiding her here, in this palace. Oh? Fine, you can look then. The sooner you find yourself empty-handed, the sooner you leave me alone, you arrogant little boy. As soon as the soldiers started running and searching through the whole Diamond Palace, Miss Andra pulled Cassandra's hand towards the rear of that secret passageway. Even for their small frames, it was hard to go through the whole passage. They had to be as silent as possible to not be noticed by the men searching for them. Cassandra had never been so scared before, but it became even worse when they heard a dragon's screech. Both sisters froze, realizing the situation was more dire than what they had thought. Miss Andra gasped, and turned to her. That wasn't the black one, she whispered. No, whispered Cassandra, shaking her head. That was Vrihan's dragon. The two girls were absolutely terrified. That crazy red dragon was looking for them. Suddenly, they heard the stones above their heads making an awful noise, and for a second, they froze, fearing that the walls around them were going to collapse on top of them. This would be a horrible way to die, buried alive under meters of rocks. Miss Andra shivered, but she pulled Cassandra's hand again, to take her out of there. If this dragon was able to smell them or hear them, they had to get out of this secret passage as soon as possible. Both sisters kept walking, slowly and silently, until it turned completely dark. Miss Andra, in front, had a better vision, but she had to walk very slowly. Both arms extended in front of her, to make sure they weren't hitting something. She was scared Cassandra would bump into something with her big belly, but thankfully, she soon found the end of the passage. It seemed closed, in front of them, but she recognized a fabric under her fingers, instead of rocks. They were behind some sort of curtain. Miss Andra waited for a second, hesitating. What if soldiers were already in the room, searching? She took a deep breath and waited a second. With her eyes blinded by the darkness, she could easily focus on her hearing. After a full minute, she was sure there was no one on the other side. She very carefully pushed the curtain aside and glanced behind it. Then, when she was sure this place was safe, she pulled Cassandra in. This place wasn't exactly a room, more like a large wardrobe, or a tiny storage room. There were dozens of clothes and large fabrics hung here and there, like the one they had come from behind. Miss Sandra's first instinct was to run to the door, making sure it was locked. It was, but she could hear people running on the other side. Was the door hidden on the other side? It seemed like no one was stopping to check it. "Miss Andra," whispered Cassandra. The older sister had just found a big bag with some clothes, dried food, and a lot of money. This was definitely meant for their escape. Miss Andra nodded, and walked up to her, away from the door, but they had another issue. "How are we supposed to leave?" she whispered as well. "They'll catch us the minute we go out of that door. Shall we stay here? There has to be another exit." Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.